just such a blessing. And so anybody that's kind of afraid, that's out there, that's listening to this, it's afraid to kind of show that part of themselves or their weirdness. And it doesn't have to even be spirituality. Like you could just be like, in really into anime or whatever. Like, don't be afraid to show that part of yourself, because that's what makes you special and unique. And the world needs more people that are unapologetically themselves right now.
Hey everyone, welcome to A Talk with G, the podcast where we explore ancient wisdom, modern wellness, and everything in between. Today I have a super special guest with me today. We actually were in a course together. We've actually connected a few times. I'm here today with Alicia.
Hey, everybody. My name is Alicia. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Gia, for creating this space and allowing me to come share with you. So a little bit about what I do. I am a shamanic healing practitioner. I am a Dharma coach, soul purpose coach, and I do a lot of ancestral wisdom and medicine. That's kind of the basis of my practice. So I do a lot of ancestor work, a lot of shamanic healing practices, which involve different forms of meditation or energy clearings, a lot of journey work or trance work, meditation, things like that. So I'm just really excited to be here. Thank you.
Great. I'm excited. I can't wait to see. I've worked with you already once before, and it actually brought a lot of stuff up. So I'm interested. You had me intrigued. Let's talk. Let's talk about what you want to, like, what you think, or like, I don't know. You lead the topic. I'm here for you.
Yeah, totally. So I've been really wanting to share a lot about like ancestor work and things like that. That's been really coming up a lot for me. I have been involved personally in an ancestor veneration practice for multiple years now. And so for people that are not familiar with what that means, it essentially is a way that as just a regular person, you can connect with your ancestors and develop a relationship with those that have passed on from this plane, and keep a connection with them. And they could be your physical blood ancestors. Like, for example, I work a lot with my paternal grandfather, or they could be cultural ancestors for some people. Like if you are, let's say you're in martial arts and there is someone that began the practice that you follow, that could be someone that you could consider an ancestor. And so I thought it would be really important to share this, because I think a lot of people don't realize that they can connect with their ancestors, and they can be such a valuable ally for you, just in life overall. Even if you're not a super spiritual person, if you're kind of dabbling in spirituality or curious, the process of ancestor veneration spans so many different cultures, and there's so many similarities between all the different cultures, which is really always so interesting when we see that throughout history, right? Like we can see all of these like little threads of similarity from cultures that didn't have contact of doing the same thing at the same time. But yeah, so it's been very interesting and enlightening for me as I've gotten deeper into this and started to lean into trust. And at first, when you kind of get into working with ancestors or guides or things like that, it feels a little weird, because you're kind of like, I don't know why I'm being called to like say this or do this or say yes to this thing or no to this thing. And the more you trust, and the more the messages become very clear to you and how they can really help you.
I guess for anyone outside, like who doesn't do this or has never been in this, what is your recommendation for them? Like, how can you approach them or let them be more comfortable, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the first thing is really starting small. Just like any other practice, starting small and sustainable is really the best way to go. So if you have someone in your lineage that you feel really connected to, that would be where I would recommend to start. So for me, I mentioned my paternal grandfather. I started with him because he was someone I lost when I was on the younger side, but he still was very impactful in my life. And he had a lot of honorable traits that I wanted to connect with. And so as I got further into my own spiritual path, which I think is a backside story we can talk about after. But as I kind of got more into reconnecting to my cultural roots and my cultural identity, I felt like that was a good place for me to start, with someone that I was biologically related to, that was a part of the culture I felt disconnected from. So what I did and what I recommend to people is start with one person and create a sacred space for them. And it doesn't have to be like a huge shelf or like anything. You can have just like a little spot in a room where you have a cloth that you use. I recommend just something to designate that space. Even if you just start with that and a picture, that's a great place to start. And just spend a little bit of time there every once in a while. You want to build up to it. Ideally, you would have something that you could provide for your ancestors, like some sort of offering. A lot of times what we like to do, depending on the culture, there'll be water, there'll be a candle, there'll be incense, there'll be food. There's kind of mixed opinions on whether people include hot food like meals or just, like fruits or things like that. So there's different ideas about that, but I recommend do what feels right to you. But initially starting off small like that. So let's say in the instance of my grandfather, having the picture of my grandfather there, having a glass of water and just a little candle, even a tea light, just that I would light every once in a while, and just spend some time there. Just sit there and just acknowledge them. Just take a moment. For me, it was sitting there with my grandfather and just, I miss you and I really wish I had your guidance, and I'm here. And I hope that you're there listening, and it just develops from there. And then you start the consistency of the practice, and then maybe you have other ancestors you want to add. For me, I actually have some ancestors behind me here, not the whole thing, but I've got various ancestors. And also, as I built the practice, I start to include things that the ancestors would want or that would make them feel special and welcome and loved. So, for example, with this example of my grandfather, he was a very strong Catholic. So I have a Bible, like a really small one that fits on the shelf, but like a Bible, because he would appreciate that, because he would go to church every Sunday, right? Even if that is not necessarily part of my practice, it's to honor them. So sometimes it'll be different things. Like I have another grandfather or a great grandfather that used to smoke cigars. So sometimes I'll have a cigar on there, and then, eventually I'll go burn it outside or something like that. So then the smoke goes up, and smoke a lot of times is thought to be a direct connection to our ancestors. So when you're burning things, the smoke is an offering to them. So a lot of times different people will burn incense, usually sweet smelling incense, because it's kind of like a gift. But there are other types of incense, depending again on your culture, that maybe don't smell as sweet, but are favorable to that culture. Like in the case of the cigar, I'm not going to necessarily maybe burn a cigar in my house, but I will burn it on a fire that is an offering to them with other things, right? So that's kind of like how I recommend people get started. Start small, dedicated space. Start with like one person that you feel like you could connect to, and then build from there. Give them some offerings, candle and water at minimum, and then see where it goes.
I like that. I guess my next question is, and it's not a question because I do want to hear your connection with your grandfather, but what is the benefit of this? Like I've obviously dabbled in it, but for those of us who are not aware of it, what's the benefit of reaching out to our ancestors? A lot of people are like, they're gone. I don't have that connection. I never knew them. Like, I just want your take, because I feel like I've had this conversation with numerous friends, and they're like, well, I don't do that. That's not my practice. And it's like, it's not a practice. It's like acknowledging. So I just kind of want to hear your take on that.
Yeah, totally. So I think, I think there's a couple things to this. So one of them is that and we're coming, obviously having this conversation in the United States, we're part of Western culture, right? So we are living in an area that has been colonized from people that have been colonized in various ways. So we have a lot of disconnection from our cultural identities, just overall in the United States and in Western society, because we were not raised, most of us, or a lot of us, I can't obviously speak for everybody, we're not raised with the cultural identities and ideals of our ancestors, right? And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Everyone's got their own path, but a lot of people are so disconnected from who they are. And I think a lot of that has to do with not having a basis in any sort of cultural identity. And so that feeling of disconnection as you get older and as you start to just become more and more of a part of Western society, like they just feel like there's just so much more of a rift between us as humans connected to our sense of place, I guess, or our own cultural identities and where we are now. And so when you start working with your ancestors, that can really help heal something inside of you. I know for me, speaking from personal experience, that was a big thing that I went through, and something that I found was super helpful, because I I'm a product of two totally different cultures. Like I'm Hispanic on one side and then Greek on the other side. And so neither of those people are from here, right? So, and then coming here from somewhere else at a time when, the people that came here, the only thing they wanted to be was American, right? So they're going to get rid of everything or not bring with them or weren't able to bring with them all of the practices, the ideals, the ideas, the identities that they had before when they came to this place. And so connecting with your ancestors in this way can be such a fulfilling way to reconnect to pieces of yourself that you didn't know you didn't have. And once you start creating any sort of ancestor veneration, even if it's small and in passing, you will find synchronicities start to line up for you where things will show up that will help you to find connection back to yourself or find connection to community or culture in ways that you didn't even know were lacking and missing in your life.
I completely resonate with you on that. It definitely is a game changer when you have, I guess, when you have that extra connection. Like people are just like, "Oh, I don't get it," but you make sense. Like it's giving you back your identity. You're absolutely right. My mother, them, came here at such a young age. They had to change who they were, and they grew up in a Western world. Not to say that they couldn't keep it, but a lot of people were told like you can't have this. You kind of want to fit in, and I love that you're bringing this back. It's like bringing it back home.
Mm-hmm.
So how long have you been in this work?
Yeah. So I've been actually the ancestor veneration part of really over the past 4 years dove into a lot. I've always had some sort of spiritual practice. I mentioned that my grandpa was a staunch Catholic, right? So I guess kind of the backstory of this is when I was young, I was always really curious about like plants and like I would talk to the wind when I was a little kid and all these like kind of now I realize kind of witchy things, right? And then when I was 13, somebody like gave me a tarot deck and I found out about Wicca and I was so interested. I'm like, oh, what is this magic thing, right? And so I got actually this same grandpa, to buy me a book. I convinced him it was like a story book, like a novel, but it was about witchcraft because I was just curious. And so then they figured out what the book was. And then they actually made me shred the book and they forced me to get baptized. So it was this whole like religious traumatic experience, right? Of like talk about witch wound, like having to go underground. Like the interest never went away. I just realized I couldn't show this part of myself to people. So that led to even further disconnection because at that time there was not anything really even from available about those types of things from my culture. And now 20 years later, I know a lot more about those things because there's more access to information now with the internet. And, especially as unfortunate as the pandemic was, it really actually brought me to some of my mentors that took me so deep into this work that I've been able to really reconnect to my cultural identity and things like that. But so to kind of answer the question, I've been doing some form of this type of work for like over 20 years. It's just only been in the past since the pandemic, really, that I was able to step into it in a way that felt comfortable and good to me and didn't feel like I was reading in a book somebody else's experience and trying to apply it to my life. I was able to find my own connections, find the path to the things that were connected to my heritage. And it felt more comfortable and more at home than any of the other things ever really did.
It's so interesting you say that as like a kid they made you shred the book. I don't have a similar experience, but I do have a similar experience, if that makes sense. Like I can relate with you. I've been always into astrology my whole life, and that's my thing. I'm like, well, I'm an Aquarius, and then I'm Indian, so it's like, well, my Vedic one is different, and like my family's like, what are you doing? And it's like we believe in it, we do prayers, we open it, so why can't I dabble in it? And it's like you're nuts, and it's like I get the disconnect, but no, I really like that. I like that. I actually find it funny they made you shred and get you baptized because it's like something out of the movies when you think about it. It's like, no, you need to go find the Lord right now.
Totally.
My next question to you is, if someone was new to this, like how would they start? Like I know you told us how to connect, but how would they start to like maybe they want to study this? Is there like opportunities out there for this or something you offer in this sense, like to help others connect or study more about this?
Yeah, totally. Great questions. So, personally, in my practice, I do offer one on one sessions with people. And so, what I do is I really tailor it to what the individual needs. So, sometimes I'll help people that are like in a corporate experience because I came from a corporate background. So, I've done a lot of work overcoming corporate burnout and things like that, and using a lot of these ancestral practices and shamanic practices to incorporate into my regular life. So like I'm not a monk that like lives out on a mountain. I actually like exist in regular society, just like everybody else. But I take all of these tools and incorporate them into my own life to find balance. So I help other people do that in one-on-one sessions. Sometimes it'll be Reiki because I do. I'm a Reiki master as well, so I incorporate Reiki techniques. Some sort of like kind of shamanic Reiki because I incorporate some of the energy clearing work that I do in the shamanic practices. Sometimes it'll be journey work where, let's say, we're going to go. One that comes up a lot is journeying into the Sacred Heart, which I know we've experienced together, but where you journey in basically into your own heart and you have an experience there with whoever needs to come through. And that's where, for me, working with my ancestors has been great because they've really opened up that channel for me. So when I am working with people, I know where to take them. I can see and things come up that maybe the person has no idea, and then it's something that is telling me this is important, you need to tell this person this thing, and it is totally life changing, right? So that definitely happens a lot. As far as the ancestor veneration practice on its own, there's some really good books that I recommend, and I can send them to you so you can put them in the show notes as well. But there's one by ERIKA BUENAFLOR, which I really love. So she has one that is CURANDERISMO veneration rites. There are one or two other ones I'll send you, but that one is really good because I feel like it, and I love her work. She's been one of the biggest mentors for me. Um, but it incorporates the historical context as well. So I love the work that she does because she is a scholar and she was a lawyer before she got into doing the spiritual work. So I think it's really good for a lot of people that tend to be kind of more on the skeptical analytical side, because you could see here's the historical basis for this. Here's references. Here's images from the codices showing how our ancestors used to use these kind of tools. And this is how they're still being used today in modern day because these people are not gone, right? They just had to assimilate. So those are kind of my recommendations. There's a couple different good books out there, but they all kind of start the same way, and all of them are good. I think whatever calls to you is really what you should go with, because a lot of times with books too, you'll find you resonate more with one person's teachings or the way they speak or write versus somebody else.
So you just sparked like three more questions in my head. I
Yeah,
think
I love it.
this one
I'm
is
here for it.
more like this is going to be more for our corporate people that are afraid to dabble in anything or afraid to touch. Like what you've said, you've been a part of this your whole life. And, we both have that in similarities. Like we've been dabbling in stuff that we like, but we ended up in corporate. Like, what was your experience being in corporate? And then, all of this on the side. Like, how did that work for you? How long were you in corporate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's see, 10 years, 10 years corporate girly. And in various kind of sectors of the same industry. So my background is in the wine and spirits industry, which is completely seems totally at odds with doing spiritual work. So I will just call that out because it definitely sometimes feels that way as I've gotten further into it. But it was interesting because, kind of going back to that whole feeling like I had to hide everything about myself thing. I didn't show that part of myself publicly for a really, really long time. And it's only been over the past, probably since COVID, really, that I got more comfortable because I got to the point where I was just like, F it, like, whatever. I mean, I didn't go full bore out like, hey, let me pull tarot cards out of my purse, like in the middle of an event, even though I would have had them in my purse, or I have specific cards stashed in my bra, right? Like I'm over here, needing to communicate very clearly. And I've got like the Queen of Wands in my bra or whatever, so like, little things like that I would incorporate. But over the past couple of years, I've just gotten more and more comfortable. It's like it reminds me of exposure therapy. Like if you've anyone that's ever done therapy and there's something that you're afraid of, or you want to get more comfortable with, you do exposure therapy where you just like kind of dip your toes in a little bit at a time and it feels safe. And you're like, oh, I didn't die. Like, it's okay. I can do it again, do a little bit more. And so that was kind of the approach that I've taken. And even now there's still stuff that like, I still have a separate Instagram, right? And the one that I'll cross post some stuff sometimes, but I'm still not fully comfortable to be like, hey, all of my corporate people, this is what I do. But sometimes I do. And it's actually when we were doing the DCI program together, I had a live coaching session, a hot seat moment with Sahara, and I was talking about this specific thing, like having these like multiple Instagram accounts and kind of compartmentalizing myself because I was afraid to really show these people this thing. And she had some really awesome advice in that those people are the people that need that thing more than anybody else, because you are that person. And like, what do you need is that, right? That's your healing. That's your medicine, your magic. And so it was actually once I started showing that part of myself on my corporate Instagram, that was when I really started getting more comfortable, because I had people that I had known for a long time that didn't know that I did any of this reach out to me and be like, oh my God, I didn't know you did this. This is so amazing. Like, I actually am looking for a breathwork facilitator for this retreat, or like all of this just resounding positive feedback. And it was just such a blessing. And so anybody that's kind of afraid, that's out there, that's listening to this, and it's afraid to kind of show that part of themselves or their weirdness. And it doesn't have to even be spirituality. Like, you could just be like, in really into anime or whatever. Like, don't be afraid to show that part of yourself, because that's what makes you special and unique. And the world needs more people that are unapologetically themselves right now, because we have all become these kind of like, especially in corporate, we've all become this like corporate robot, have to do the politics, have to like say all the things, and I need to go to this event, or I need to like be on this Zoom call and I have to look a certain way or whatever. But like, you don't actually, like, you really don't, because the world doesn't need more corporate zombies. The world needs more people that are awake and alive to the inherent potential within them.
I love, 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 love that you just said that. It's refreshing to hear from another person. Like, we don't need more corporate zombies. We actually need more people who are like actually looking when they're walking. But no, I think that's epically awesome. And you're right. I do remember that conversation with Sahara. Like, those are the people we need to reach out to. This was great. Like,
Yeah.
I'm so glad we talked about this. I'm so glad we got to do this. So I couldn't help but notice you said you do tarot also, like having the tarot card in your bra. Like, what led you to tarot? Like, are you a tarot reader? Is that something you offer? Are those services?
Great question. So, yes. And just like most people, when they first start out with tarot, I was super like nervous and embarrassed and like second guessed it. I've now been reading tarot for like 25 years, which sounds, when you get to a point in your life where you're like, I've been doing something for 20 years, it's completely mind blowing, by the way, because I do not feel like I am old enough to have been able to do anything for 20 years except breathe. But when I was like, I was like 13, and someone gave me a tarot deck. Actually, I still have it. And I had no clue. So I just would read the little book that came with it. And like, I wouldn't even memorize the cards, because at that time, I don't know why. I mean, I was 13, right? I obviously was not, my prefrontal cortex has not fully developed for like another 10 years. But I just kept going at it. I just kept doing what I could, learning here and there. And then I actually got led to a school when I was living in Santa Cruz, California at the time. And I stumbled upon this program, which is one of those, like, the universe always leads you where you're supposed to go kind of things. I saw a flyer at this bookstore that I had never been to before for an introduction to tarot class. And it was at the Santa Cruz School for Tarot and Kabbalah Studies. And so that was really helpful for me, because it was a deep dive into all of the cards, major arcana, minor arcana. And so I was able to really learn more in depth. And that helped me to learn about reading the symbolism of the cards, which is what I'm a huge proponent of now. And now fast forward, that was already, over 15 years ago. So now I do a lot of reading for people. I teach people how to read tarot. I do different workshops or classes, things like that. different thematic classes. I'm actually right now working on I don't have a date for it yet, but I'm working on this a class that is about tarot symbolism. As I mentioned, I'm really a big proponent of that, but specifically on the chakras. So reading like chakra significance and colors through tarot. So like how to incorporate that when you're reading cards. So that's definitely something that I do as well. So I offer readings on my website. I do either live readings or recorded readings. Recorded is kind of nice because you can just be like, okay, here, and then I'll just send a video and send it back to you. Live ones are nice in a different way because I can ask questions, but I've done a ton of readings where I just do recordings and like I can tell from the thing what's happening, and I'll give options like, okay, I'm seeing this. If this doesn't resonate with you, it might be this, but based on the other information that I'm seeing here, this is what I understand and what I'm being guided to. And also when I'm reading, I'll have certain things that will pop out on the cards. So like, I mentioned symbolism, right? Huge on that. And like chakra colors. So like I'll see something, let's say somebody is cloaked in red, or they have a red cloak or a red jacket or something. So I'm like, okay, well, this person is obviously like in their power, right? This is like where they're grounded, or different things, or like they've got something blue that's all tattered that could maybe indicate that they have an imbalance in their throat chakra. They're not speaking their truth, right? So you can look through different ways like that and kind of find just different tools, and they're all just different tools that will help guide you to the messages from the universe. And I really believe that. So I think also having a tarot practice and then really connecting with my ancestors strengthened my tarot and oracle reading practice so much. Like my readings are so intuitive now that I've really strongly developed that practice and leaned into trusting, reading the images and the symbolism on the deck versus trying to memorize something out of a book, or memorize like, okay, this is the Four of Pentacles. That means this,
So that's pretty interesting, actually. So with my work, I do a lot of shadow and inner child work, which is around our chakras anyways. So I think that's interesting that you use tarot cards to notice the chakras. I've actually never, I actually started over that. I've never heard of that being done. That's pretty amazing. And it's funny you say it. Like, I can't believe I can say 25 years I've been doing something, because I've been feeling a lot like that lately too. I can't say 25 years, but like when someone goes your experience on something and it's like, oh, more than 7, I've been doing it since I was like 15, and it's like, that's almost 17 years. And I'm like, oh, that's a long time to be doing something. But with that said, you have so many gifts. Like, how do you know to hone into them? Like, how come you're not like directly path to one? And I get it, you know so much, share so much, but like, do you feel like it's overdoing it for you sometimes? Like, do you feel like maybe you're spreading yourself thin in that sense?
So do I feel like I'm spreading myself thin? I think honestly, I feel more like I'm spreading myself thin just in like my regular day-to-day life than like in my, I guess, metaphysical practices. Because once you start diving into one of them and then you find something else, like you realize how interconnected they all really are. Um, I think there can be a lot of power in focusing on something, for sure. Like if you're interested in like using the tarot as the example, right? Like really going hard on that one thing and developing a strong foundation and then branching out. Versus like sometimes people will be like, oh, I'm into tarot and astrology and I'm into crystals and I'm into herbs, and they can only name like one thing about each of those things. And I think some of that is a product of just the society that we live in, right? Like we live in such an instant gratification, like, oh, I have to know about everything, when really there's so much more power if you learn really deeply about one thing, and then you can find out later how they're all interconnected. I think when I was young, or younger, I'm still young, but when I was a baby witch, I guess you could say, um, I was in that like, oh my gosh, I want to learn everything that there is to know about everything. So like I would read whatever I could because I just had this like voracious thirst for knowledge. And I think there's some merit to that in terms of figuring out what you like, but then stepping into something a little bit more deeply to get a deeper understanding. So I think I feel more now like I have more focus, even though I have a couple of things I do. I could, to some people, would still seem like I could be spreading myself too thin because I am doing like, herbalism and the shamanic and Reiki and tarot, but really like all of those things could be encapsulated just within the shamanic practices because they're all aspects of the one thing. So sometimes I just compartmentalize them because some people maybe don't want or are not ready to go and do more deeper internal work and go visit them as a little kid at this traumatic moment in their life and find that soul piece and figure out what kind of healing it needs to come back. And they're just not ready for that. And that's okay. Those people maybe just want a Reiki session because they just know that there's energy in their body. They want to move or they want to feel different about how they're feeling right now. So I think there's different aspects that are good for different people at different stages of their life. And we're not always ready to really do the deep work. Sometimes we have to just kind of do the superficial stuff first until that feels like, okay, what else is there? And you can't force people into doing more than they're ready for. And I know that's something that I've seen happen to people. And I've kind of actually been guilty of this myself. Like, having such a deep knowledge of things and seeing things from a spiritual lens, and knowing what's best for people and having to just like shut up because they don't want to hear it or they're not ready for it or whatever. So you have to like sometimes just be like, oh, okay, I love that for you. You know, like, I mean, I know that wasn't part of the question, but it just kind of like made me think about that, kind of led me there.
It's kind of funny to just show that question, like that answer, because that was my next question, which you kind of answered already. So it's like, okay, you're in my head. You already answered the question. There's nothing there for me to ask past this point, in that sense. But that was pretty interesting because I literally was going to ask you, like, what do you think, like, with people who don't? And you're like, well, no. I'm like, all right, she answered it. Hands up, like, no questions asked. Further point of that. With all that, like, you've offered us today, I want to just give you like a moment to like open up to everyone and like give us anything you have. Like, I feel like you've answered so many questions for us, and there's so many like virtues things you've given us. I'm gonna put your link down in the caption here so you guys can definitely book with her and the books you're gonna recommend. But I'm kind of just like feeling the call to give you the floor. Share anything you need to share at this point before we wrap up.
Yeah, thank you. I guess what I'm being called to share is really, don't be afraid to be weird. Um, if you're interested in something that seems like it's outside of the norm, follow that thread and see where it takes you. When the universe is giving you signs, if you can, try and listen the first time. But if you can't, just trust that the sign will keep coming up until you're ready for it. Sometimes you're led somewhere because the place that you wanted to go was not where you were supposed to go. And that's really hard to see that in the moment, but trust that you're always being guided where you're supposed to go. And the more that you do this kind of work, the more that the more you open yourself up to the possibilities of the universe, the more the universe will respond with possibilities for your life. So just trust in that and know that, you can connect to yourself in ways that you never thought. Trust your guides, trust in spirit, whatever that looks like for you, whether you're religious, not religious, if you have specific deities that you work with or you don't, ancestors, not ancestors, angels, etc. Know that they're always on your side and they're always working on your behalf and in your favor. And the universe is always conspiring in your favor, whether you believe it or not.
You kind of gave me like a mind blowing there. You're like, you said so many things and so many things just resonated with me. And I'm just like captivated with you. No, this was awesome. And I thank you so much for today. Guys, like whoever's tuning in, like be sure to check out her page. She's on IG, like she mentioned, not her corporate page, but like, her other page. Just check it out there.
You can do both. You can do both.
Oh, you can do both. You can do both. She's open to both, guys. She's open. Like, let everybody in. With that, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. I appreciate you coming in, Alicia. You've literally given me like just now, you've like literally like left me with like so much thoughts. And I'm like, damn it, I hope she wasn't going to do that today. And she did it like perfectly. So with that said, I'm thanking Alicia for joining us. Thank you all for tuning in. If you have any questions, be sure to drop a comment. Either of us will get back to you. Check out her pages, book a reading with her or a tarot card, whichever you're called to. With that, everyone stay happy, stay balanced, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Alicia, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you so much for having me. And if anyone that is interested in booking with me, I also do offer just a 10-minute like consultation call if you just want to like see if the vibe is good or get an idea of what kind of services might be good for you. And you can find me on Instagram at Mystic Lunar Elements. That's also my website, mysticlunarelements.com. And I really look forward to chatting with you. And Gia, thank you so much. This has been lovely.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Again, everyone, stay balanced, and I'll catch you guys the next time.